regardless of who you know and what opportunities you have in front of you or what resources you have or what resources you need, and obviously you have to be able to sit down and have a discussion at some point in time, right? Whether that discussion be electronic, whether it be through your marketing, whether it be on the telephone or on the phone or in person, you have to be able to communicate. You have to be able to hopefully persuade. In some cases, maybe even be able to negotiate. Now, we're going to share some things and some strategies with you. It's probably not the traditional negotiation. It's not the type of negotiation where you sit down and go back and forth and bluff and do all the things that they kind of teach you in negotiation school of, how to walk out of the room and act like you're pulling the deal away and all that kind of stuff. We're really not about that. What we like to do is share with people different ways that you can create a meaningful message about a meaningful opportunity and hopefully create a meaningful relationship that's a win-win opportunity for everyone involved. But before you can do that, you have to, number one, be able to communicate and articulate what it is that you see as the opportunity. Number two, you have to be able to recognize what it is that's important to the other person. And number three, you have to be able to communicate it in such a way that they can understand it, that they're receptive to it, and that they're open to the possibility of at least considering what it is that you're presenting to them. Would you agree? Without that ability, communication doesn't happen, or effective communication doesn't happen. I guess you'd be communicating even if you're not doing anything. But at the same time, if you can be effective about what you're communicating in such a way that it makes the most sense possible for the person that you're working with, or it makes the most practical, appealing sense possible for the person that you're negotiating with, in many cases that can make all the difference between someone saying yes, someone saying maybe, or someone saying absolutely no. So with that, Darren, why don't you jump in there, buddy?
Okay. One of the things is that you need to be able to get rapport. Now, does anyone not know what rapport is? Raise your hand. Okay. Well, when you're communicating or trying to do joint ventures or even whether you're communicating with anyone, whether it's your husband, wife, children, business partners, trying to negotiate something, one of the key elements is being able to build rapport with them. And most people build surface level rapport. And what we're going to teach you is a skill that we use as you build rapport at the unconscious level. Because that's where it's your unconscious mind. Remember we talked about the metaphor on day one about the ship, the captain and the crew. Who's really in charge is the crew, and that's your unconscious mind. So unless your unconscious mind actually feels rapport with that other person, then it will give you little voices inside your head that says, no, something's not right about that person, perhaps we won't go ahead, or we won't do the deal, or whatever else. So you need to be able to get unconscious rapport. Now, what's some of the ways that most people get rapport generally? Just yell them out. Asking questions, yep. What was that? Matching body language, yeah. Empathy, yep. Breathing rate, there's some people know how to do it already. Yes. Touch, yep.
Endeavouring to be helpful to the other person.
Helpful to the other person, yep. They listen, yep. Often, yep. Same language, yep. Mirroring and matching, we'll come to that. So, yeah, there's a number of different ways. Now, one of the ways what rapport really happens to break that down at the unconscious level is we want to really enter that person's model of the world, of how they think and how they feel, how they see things, how their brain operates, and that you want to get inside their head if you want to match them. Because if you want to be able to connect with that person at a deep level so they feel, as we spoke about, you have to have trust. Someone is not going to go into partnership with you or work with you if they do not trust you. All right? And they have to trust you at the unconscious level. Because if they don't trust you at the unconscious level, they will not do something with you. All right, so we're going to teach you some rapid techniques of how to get that trust and how to interact with that, because one, you'll have a better relationship with that person long term, because there's an old saying that people used to have out there, and they would say, "I'll treat other people just like you would like to be treated." That's bullshit. All right? I'm sorry to say, is because you need to treat them how they want to be treated. All right, because just because you're maybe a really direct person and quite forceful doesn't mean that they are. So they might be less direct. And some people are extroverted, like to talk to people and everything else. Some are introverted, so they'd rather go off and read a book and be by themselves. So you need to connect at a different level. Now, one of the things to be able to do that is to understand the different ways to communicate. And that we can... He's having a cigar. How our brain operates. We all have all these senses, all right? At the unconscious level, we operate three different ways. Visually, auditorily, and kinesthetically. Right? Visually, visual processing people, how their brain works, is simply, often how you can distinguish them is they tend to talk faster, they breathe from the top of their lungs, things need to look good for them. So they'll often be dressed smart and always look really, smart, right? Because how they look is important to them, right? So they breathe from the top of their lungs, they talk fairly rapidly, and often they sound like they're out of breath because they're talking so quickly, right? They tend to, when they make pictures inside their head, they tend to, eyes will look up and move upwards, or they'll defocus and make a picture out here. So their eyes will sort of defocus and their images will be held out here. All right, so that's when somebody is operating out of a visual mode. And they'll use visual language. So they'll use words like, yeah, look, how wonderful that is. And let me show you this presentation. And, once you've seen it and had a look at it, then we can do this. So they're using visual words in their language patterns. So one of the things when you're communicating with somebody, listen to the words they're using. Right? You want to understand, well, are they using visual words? So that if you match those words and go into their style of communication, you'll build faster rapport. Somebody that processes auditorily, they tend to breathe lower down, all right? It's a little bit slower paced than visual, and they often, if you're looking at them, they would stand with their head tilted sideways. Why? Because they're lending their ear to you, all right? Because they process auditorily. So when you're looking at their eye patterns, their eyes will move from side to side because that's where they go to retrieve information from left to right, all right, rather than going up. All right, so, and what's important to them is how it sounds. So if you're having a conversation and you're doing a presentation, they'd say, well, let me tell you all about it. We can sit and talk for a while and I'll tell you about it and da-da-da. All right, so it's all about that auditory sense. All right, so, and they like things in sequence. All right, so they're very sequential in their model of thinking. All right, when you're processing kinesthetically, and remember I said you have all three of these, however, you have a primary one that you use all the time. All right, even though you can do all three, you have one that is your primary one that you use. All right, so kinesthetic people, to make sense of the world, they use feeling words. All right, I get a good gut feel about this audience, Spike. I think they're really starting to connect.
I can get in touch with that, Darren.
You can get in touch with that. Yeah, it just feels right. I really feel that connection. All right, so they use feeling words, but when they make sense, they tend to be a little bit slower paced. All right, not less intelligent by any means, just slower paced because they have to make sense of it from their body. All right, so they feel the connection and the communication. It comes up from their body, then it goes up into their mind and brain, and then out. All right, so they're really good with touch and sense and feeling words. So they don't need to look at you to have a conversation either. They might stand side by side closely to you because it's more about that connection. Right? I have 7 children and they're all different. One of my boys is very kinesthetic, so he's always wanting to touch things and feel it and everything else. Your poor little brother that sleeps in the same bed as him often wakes up in the morning and he's on the floor because Matthew tends to keep moving over because he wants to get close to his brother and he rolls him out of the bed. Right? So kinesthetic. Now, the other thing is with kinesthetic, because it has to come from their body and then go up to the mind, if you're talking really visually and you're talking really fast, then what happens is that kinesthetic person only got every third word that you said, right? Because they couldn't take it in fast enough. So you have to match their pace. So if you're talking to somebody who is processing kinesthetically, then you would need to slow down, right? Because you will actually break rapport with them. And I'll give you an example. I was in buying a Mercedes-Benz and I went in and the guy had I processed visually at the time and I went in and I walked up to the salesman. I said, "Oh, look, I just want you to show me the car. I just want to see the car." Now, there's his first tips. Show me the car. I just want to see the car. And he said, "Look, come in, Mr. Stevens, sit down. Let me tell you all about the features and the safety benefits of this car. And, we'll take half an hour and I'll explain it in detail and tell you this and tell you that." And I'm going, "Oh, God, I want to get out of here. I just want you to show me the car. Just show me the car." Anyway, so he was breaking rapport with me because he didn't understand my style, using different language and everything else. So, needless to say, I ended up getting so agitated by the guy, I was walking out, and on the way out, the sales manager said, "Oh, is there a problem?" Because he could see that there was obviously, I wasn't very happy. And I said, "Yeah, there is actually." I said, "You're about to lose a $150,000 sale." I said, "Because you don't train your sales team on how to communicate effectively with your clients." And he was all taken back. And he said, "Oh, well, come into my office, tell me what the problem was." And I said, so now this is where I started to negotiate, you see. So needless to say, I got the car about $30,000 cheaper, but at the end. However, the story goes is I said to him, "Well, look, is this salesman ever lost other sales?" And he said, "Well, as a matter of fact, he just did the other day." I said, "However, he's normally really good. He's actually our number one salesman." And I said, "Really?" And I said, "Well, why did he lose the other sales?" And he said, "Well, we haven't been able to figure that out." And I said, "Well, I can tell you why." And I said, "Because," I said, "if you lose a sale in Mercedes, because Mercedes-Benz is the same price no matter what dealership you go to. So if you've gone in there to buy one, it's only if you didn't get on with the salesperson or the environment in there, that's the only reason you would go somewhere else, because you're not going to get any really price variance, right? They have a fairly standard list price." And so after talking to him, I explained the difference of what was happening and how he broke rapport with me and everything else. So he asked me, would I come in and train their sales team for a day? And I said, well, that's for a significant discount on the car. So we did that, and we contraed quite a significant amount. But the story was he was selling 6 Prestige cars every month. And the following month, because of the things that we taught, and which we're going to show you, is he sold 13. All right? And the thing was, he'd been doing that consistently for 2 years straight, and he was their number one salesman, consistently. Selling 5 to 6 cars every single month for 2 years, and the following month, just by changing what he did, he sold 13 cars. All right? So it can have a significant difference when you're negotiating anything. All right? So, I bought my last house this way, and didn't go through a real estate agent. It's $1 million home, and this was all done privately, and so I saved a lot of money by doing that. So you have visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. All right, so you have to listen out for those different language patterns when you're dealing with people. All right, because the other thing is too, even in your own personal lives, as a personal example, one day Jackie, my wife, and I were talking, and she said to me, I don't feel loved by you. Well, I was really taken back and really shocked. I said, what? I said, I tell you, because I was processing here at that time in my life, I said, I tell you how much I love you every single day. And she said, yep, but I don't feel like I'm loved by you. And why? Because she processed visually. I had to show her that I loved her. Give her flowers or, touch or whatever, and actually show her. Because telling her wasn't hitting her hot buttons and wasn't going in at the unconscious level and connecting with her. All right? So it's really important that you understand those differences when it comes to communication, especially in business. Because how are you communicating with your staff or someone that you're wanting to do a joint venture with? Yes, sir?
Well, I'm a bit confused here. Your wife said she didn't feel you loved her, and then you said she was a visual person, so you had to show her.
Yeah.
She said feel, and you said show. So I think straight away there's kind of a...
Well, there's...
Yeah, go on.
There's an important point. I mean, and Darren mentioned that we all operate within all three of these. And in many cases, we have a lead system. Okay?
A lead, yes.
A lead
Lead
system
reference.
might be visual. And in Jackie's case, it was like, okay, you show me. If you show me something, I'll feel this. Okay, so what she needed, this is, we all feel emotions, okay? We don't see emotions. We don't hear emotions. We feel emotions. So in order for us to get to the feeling, because we're all kinesthetic to some degree, lead system might be visual, might be auditory, might be kinesthetic.
Let me tell you, when you're having sex, it's kinesthetic.
Yeah. It can start off visual.
Yeah,
It can start
it
off
starts
visual.
off visual. But it very, very quickly gets down here. And you get the ooh, ooh here.
You know, I'll make a quick point. That's tough to follow, buddy. Ooh. Yeah, that's right. Doesn't happen often, but once or twice a seminar, it happens all the time. We'll take your question in a moment, but you know, Darren mentioned something that when someone is communicating in a very visual style, and I'm highly visual, and I talk very, very rapidly, and I have to kind of like slow myself down. Otherwise, But what happens if someone is operating in a kinesthetic state, and you come across and you start talking really rapidly, like I do, it gives them anxiety, right? They can't process the information, and they start getting all worked up. So, and the other thing to keep in mind with this is that we all kind of cycle through these things. You know, someone could be very, very highly visual, but something happened at home. You know, they had a crisis in their life, and they may now be operating predominantly that day in a kinesthetic thing. So it's not a one-time thing where you go and you develop a report and you think, okay, every time I see this person, I'm going to go back and I'm going to talk in visual language because they're always visual. In some cases, you just have to kind of pay attention to what's going on and kind of what their body language is and what their speech is like. And the next time you come back, they'll be talking very, very rapidly and talking about all the things they want to see and all the things you're going to show them and everything that they have to just have a picture of and an image of in their mind before they can make a decision.
That's right. Now, I got to tell you, who's here has gone and had a massage before or some sort of, you know, like that? Okay, who's ever had a massage where, you know, they've had one that's been fantastic, the person sort of just sensed and knew exactly where the muscles were sore and everything else, and it was just amazing. And then other times they've had a massage from somebody and they went, oh, that person was okay, but they really didn't have the same sensibility in their hands. Who's had that? Well, I guarantee you the person that gave you the best massage processed kinesthetically. All right? Because they make sense of it. You know, they all normally make better tradesmen as well because they, you know, they're good with their hands and everything else, but they're certainly good with massages and everything else. And in our economy, what happens is most people that are unemployed here in Australia process kinesthetically. Why? Why do you think that is? And most people that have got on drug addictions process kinesthetically. Why is that?
They're emotionally reactive. They become emotionally involved.
Well, they certainly, what happens when you take drugs is you get a huge body sensation, which is a great feeling. Not that I've ever taken any.
So you hear.
So I'm here. So the feeling if someone's high on marijuana or whatever else, you know, they tend to, you know, be spaced out or whatever. It's a great feeling. So they get addicted much easier to those things because it has a kinesthetic body reaction for them. Now, the reason that they're the most unemployed is because they don't do as well in interviews, right? When they go for a job, they process a little bit slower. You know, they're not less intelligent, but compared to the person that comes in who's visual or auditory and says, oh yeah, I'm going to love this job, I'm going to do this for you, and they actually do interview better in the interviewing process. So that's why they tend to get employed faster. And what you find is most people that are on assembly lines or production lines process kinesthetically because they're, you know, that's the job that they are able to get. You know, or they've, you know, gone into sports or they're massage therapists or things like that because that's where they gravitate because it suits them. All right, but you know that's getting away from it a little bit. But what we wanted to share with you is there's 3 different styles that people operate out of. So you need to pay attention to them because when you're communicating, there was back in actually it was 1970. And I was corrected before by Spike because I thought it was Stanford University, but it's UCLA. And what happens is what people pay attention to is 7% is what people pay attention to as far as words go. And it's 38% of tonality. And 55% is your physiology. So that's what people pay attention to. And I'll give you a demonstration, is to show you how much, you know, people pay attention to words. Because I'm going to sing you a little song. and you tell me if you like this as your new presenter. Yeah, let's give myself a mistake. Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow. Everywhere that Mary went, that lamb was sure to go. All right, so that's one person. And this is the other person. Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow. Everywhere that Mary went, that lamb was sure to go. Which one do you want as your presenter? Second one. Because what people pay attention to is the tonality that you deliver it and your physiology. It's not so much the words they're saying, this is where people's attention is. So how you show up and talk to and communicate tonality-wise and physiology-wise makes a huge impact at the unconscious level to what people pay attention to. All right, so it's important to understand the visual, auditory and kinesthetic when you're negotiating and getting rapport with somebody, all right, so that you can connect at a deeper level. But also when you are communicating, understand that these are really important, right, because that's what people pay attention to. And the words that you use inside your head and externally have an impact on your business, have an impact on your life. Now I'm going to do a demonstration. I just want somebody to come up on stage. Who's a volunteer? Come up. Actually, I'll grab this lady from the front because we'll give you a book.
Thank you.
All right. Now, what I'd like you to do, and you're all going to get to do this, so watch carefully, is I'm going to ask you to put out your hand like this. I'm just going to do a strength test to see how strong you are, and just resist this. And I'm going to use 2 fingers, and I'm going to push down. So I just want you to resist. Right, good. Now, what I want you to yell out is that that you're weak, and that you're hopeless, pathetic, you're no good, all these negative words about yourself.
Well, I'm glad I didn't come
I'm
up.
no good, I can't do anything, I'm useless, I'm hopeless. Can you do that for me? And I want you to yell it out with intensity. All right? But I'm going to do the strength test at the same time. Ready? Go.
I'm terrible, I'm useless.
All right, now, we're going to do the same thing again. I want you to say, this time I'm fantastic, I'm strong, I'm powerful, I can do anything, I can achieve anything I want. All positive affirmations. And resist as hard as you can. Go, as you're saying it. Go.
I'm great, I'm wonderful, I'm fabulous, I know everything. I've got such a big ego.
All right, there's a huge difference, all right, in the strength. And that's what language does as well. The language that you have inside your head makes a difference to your physiology and your body and what you connect with people on. So your mind and body is connected in what's called a cybernetic loop. So what you imagine in your mind with absolute intensity when you're setting your goals and everything else, your body will react and show up the way that you are intensely doing that. And so this is why it's important to get a real clear structure written down, what you want to achieve, where you're going, what it's going to look like, because the more vivid that is, the more it has an impact on your body, your unconscious mind, and how you show up, how you connect with those people, how those people will respond back to you. You know, if you've already visualised making that joint venture relationship with somebody and this is what's going to happen and you're going to be doing this together and everything else, then you're going to show up at that meeting and connect with that person at a totally different level. All right? And because your mind is already tracking, well, that's already done, so it relates differently. So you're not going to turn up nervous or anything else. All right? It has a huge impact at the unconscious level.
Yep. You know, I want to make a point here on something that Darren was covering earlier, and it's important to keep in mind, is that unless you're sensory impaired, you know, you're blind or you're deaf, you know, everyone operates through these systems. We mentioned that one is a primary system or a lead system, but also the predominant system in some cases can be context dependent. And I'll give you an example. I'm very, 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 very visual at work. In fact, I'm so visual that when I listen to something, I listen to a CD, I listen to it at 150% speed, right? Because I want it really, really fast, because I want a lot of information and I want it quick. But when I'm at home and I'm with my kids, you know, I'm a little bit more laid back. Or if I'm in a social event with someone that I know very, very well, I mean, I probably cycle through these very differently. So if you go in and you're sitting down and you're having a conversation with someone on a business level in a business environment, pay attention if you go to a social environment, because they may shift in terms of how much they use each one of these systems. And if you don't observe what's going on around you, or if you don't observe what's going on between you, you may be still operating very, very highly visual in terms of your language, in terms of your rate of speech, in terms of your breathing, in terms of your pacing, in terms of your magic, in terms of your mirroring, in terms of all the other things that go on. And you may find out now they just want to relax, and they just want to kind of like take it easy. And you're way up here, and they're way down here. So just, these things are incredibly powerful, incredibly valuable. But part of what you need to do is have sensory awareness, sensory perception, the situational awareness of what's going on around you, because that's the difference between having it on a page and putting it into application. Okay?
Actually, just before we go on, I want to give you a demonstration of a song. Now, this before we play it, there was a songwriter here and a performer in Australia that was doing okay with his music, but nothing huge, and he went to #1 instantly when this song came out, and his career took off. Right? You'll know this song when you hear it, and the thing is, very cleverly, you think about it, if you want to have a music or a song and you want it to sell it to as many people as possible, wouldn't it make sense to write that song so that it encompassed all three, visual, auditory and kinesthetic? Because if it only encompassed one, what happens to the population that primarily focus on auditory or kinesthetic? Well, you're not going to get them. They're not going to like the music. Right? So, listen to this song, and I'm going to point out where the connection is between visual, auditory and kinesthetic of how he's done this, and this is what made him so famous. And he had 3 songwriters write this song specifically this way, okay, for that purpose. Hit it. You'll know this song. See it next time, and you'll see he's rotated between visual, auditory and kinesthetic through that whole song. And he has the music for all the people that process auditorily with the beat, and it gets faster and faster. And then it plays bagpipes and everything else through that whole song. There's another song I'll give you a tip on why it went to #1. And you'll know this by the first bar of this song, all right, because it was that big a hit. And then I'll explain why, because they used a similar process. You want to hit the other one? What's the song? Flashdance. Right? Now that song is all about, oh what a feeling and everything else. But what made it a hit, it rotates between auditory and kinesthetic all the time. And then it gets faster and faster and faster with the music. So all the visual people go, oh thank goodness. Right? You can kill it. But why it became such a big hit was why they made a movie out of it. So all the people could see it. Right? And they could see her dancing through the air, and it had the other 2 components. That's why Michael Jackson's movie, or when he first came out, his song Thriller, right, because it was all in freeze frame when he was doing it, was such a big hit. Because it actually hit everyone's senses. Not only musically, but visually, auditory and kinesthetically. So, this is how they build rapport with the mass market.
Let's talk about some strategies to put this into application. Number 1, if you want to negotiate, you want to persuade, you want to communicate, you want to influence, you want to inspire someone, and we've talked about this throughout the entire program, is that you have to have a vision, right? When you're articulating a vision to someone, it needs to be a couple things. Number 1, the bigger the vision, the more inspiring it can be to most people. But you have to know how to articulate it in such a way that they can understand it, right? Do you articulate it visually? Do you articulate it auditorily? Or is it something that you have to give them that they have to get a handle on? You have to know who you're communicating with. Obviously, the sensory system is a big part of that. but also you need to know what their interests are, what their values are, what their identity is. Now, when I say their interests, it's not going in and saying, "Oh, I see you're a golfer. You have a picture on the wall. I see you're a boater. You have a picture. You have a sailboat." No, I just like the sailboat. It doesn't necessarily mean just pointing out interest, but understanding what's important to them. What is it that they do that if they enter into that transaction, that relationship, or that opportunity with you, what is it going to serve for them in terms of who they want to be, what it is that is important to them, and what it is that they do in their life or in their business. And the more you can get that information, the more you can make it appealing, and the more you can make it value enhancing for that person that you're working with. If you're not sure, and you're going in and you're proposing a sale, a transaction, okay, we'll keep it simple. You're offering someone to buy a piece of customized software for their business. And you go in and you start telling them all of the features about the software. Well, it runs at this speed and it has this amount of code and has this amount of characters and it has these buttons and it has 46 different functions and features and activities. Chances are they're not going to buy. But if you can ask the simple question, what's important to you about whatever it is? What's important to you about the software that you're looking to buy? They will tell you in their own language, in their own values, with their own level of importance about what it is that they're looking for, what it is that they need to hear, what it is that they need to feel about that software. What solution, what opportunity are they looking to realize from that software? Now, this really comes into when we're talking about joint ventures this afternoon, but it really goes into what we were talking about yesterday with risk reversal or guarantees. When you're proposing any type of an opportunity to someone, you're trying to persuade them, you're trying to negotiate something with them, you need to know what the upside and the downside is, not just for you, but for them. Okay? It's the what's in it for them thing. Now, I get, no exaggeration, I get 100 to 150 ideas that are delivered to me every month, maybe even every week. Hey, I got this great idea. This is what I want to do, and this is how I'm going to do it, and this is what it's going to give me. This is what. Number one, they don't know what appeals to me. Number two, they don't know what my interests are. Number three, they're not recognizing my values. But in many cases, the thing that turns me off the most is that they haven't thought about the upside, and they haven't thought about the downside, and they haven't put contingencies in place. Let me share something with you. Most businesses do. Do you know what contingency planning is? How many people know what contingency planning is? Okay, you plan in case something goes wrong, right? Okay. Well, that's only half the equation. Someone comes with an opportunity and they say, you know what, this is going to be bigger than Google. Right? Okay, well, what happens if it's not? Okay, we stand to lose $1 million. Everybody thinks about the downside. What most people don't do in business opportunities, what they don't do in joint ventures, and what they don't do in many transactions is that they don't think about the upside. And what happens if it works 5 times better than what you think? People in manufacturing, okay, you really understand this because you understand finite capacity. You change your marketing campaign and the person that's doing the ads for you says, you know what, this will probably increase your sales by 5%. And if it doesn't, okay, the downside is, you'll probably lose $10,000, whatever the ad campaign is. They know the downside, they haven't thought about it. But if you haven't thought about the upside, what happens if it works 3 times as well? Now you got triple the demand and half the capacity, and now you have a bunch of people that are all lathered up and you can't shave them. Right? You have a bunch of people that are now walking away disappointed because you don't have the capacity to fulfill on what it is that you promised or what it is that you committed or the desire that you created. So you have to think about upside, downside from a contingency standpoint. It's important when you're trying to negotiate, especially something that's different, and we'll talk more about this afternoon when we get into joint ventures, is that you make it easy for people to say yes. And part of the way that you do that, you do it through credibility, you do it through validation, you do it through their sensory systems, enhancing their ability to understand what it is that you're communicating. But you want to make sure that you have the questions answered, that you have the process thought through. Because a lot of times when you sit down and you have a negotiation, you have a discussion, and you're communicating with someone or you're trying to persuade them, they have questions that they will not ask. And what happens if you don't answer those questions that they didn't ask? They don't buy. They don't say yes. They don't move forward. Now, just because they didn't ask them doesn't mean they don't have the questions. So one of the things that you want to do is that when you're thinking about negotiating or persuading or even communicating with someone, you want to think on their behalf. There's the whole thing with first party, second party. When you speak in the first party, you're speaking for yourself. There's also a perspective that when you think about it from a first party perspective, you're thinking about yourself. Now, a lot of people will also say, well, you got to think about it in the second party, you got to think about the other person, right? And if you do that, chances are you're going to be much more encompassing in your communication and your persuasion and negotiation. But if you really, 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 really want to be effective, think about it in a third-party perspective, and that is, think about the interaction between the two of you and the dynamic that's going on in the transaction that you're proposing in terms of how it affects the two of you together. Because not only are you now aligned, but you've also seen it from your perspective that allows you to think about problems and challenges and things that you might not have anticipated when you were looking at it strictly from your side or strictly from the other side. Because in any transaction, any interaction, there's more than two people that are involved. There is. I mean, Darren and I could be having a conversation, and it doesn't matter if there's anyone else in the room, but whatever we decide is going to have an effect on other people in our life, in our business, our families, people around us, people that are important to us. But if you have the ability to look at it from a third-party perspective, a third-person perspective, you now can kind of step out of the transaction between the two of you and think about it in a much broader perspective.
Yeah, I was going to say, and it pays to do that if you want to keep your marriage as well. Because one time, recently I did that, was I did something on myself personally. I turned around and I committed to go onto this boat cruise. Some of you may be going on that cruise. And I said, oh yeah, and my wife, I'll take her along as well. And that's fine, but I wasn't thinking in the moment that she hates going on boat cruises because she's, gets seasick and all these other things. So if I had have thought about that in the first place, I wouldn't have, said, oh, well, I'll take her and everything else. So you really do have to think of the other person or think outside the square a little bit. But getting back to what Spike was saying is when there's often in that transaction that you're having with somebody, one of the things that I've done over the years when we teach people to sell large end ticket items with franchising, one of the things we do is often the person that comes in and looks with the husband and wife or whatever, looking at purchasing a $500,000 franchise or a license for something, we always take them through a process by saying, okay, now you understand, and they're really excited about the business because they've seen all the things that you're doing in the business and they've had that meeting and everything else. But what happens when they leave there and they go and show their accountant or their lawyer about the legal documents they've got to sign? What happens then? Normally they go, oh, well, you're really sure? They put all this doubt in the person's head. And they haven't had the experience of going in and meeting with you and seeing all the opportunity, but what do they want to do is protect their backsides. So they're going to create all this unnecessary doubt in your clients. So one of the things that we did was we always would ask the questions of the person in the meeting. We'd say, now, when you leave here and you take this to your accountant, what are you going to say to them when they say it's a really silly idea for you to buy this business opportunity? Now, what are we doing? They're coming up, oh, well, no, I would say this, and I'd say that. And what else would you say? Because we know those questions are going to get asked, and we're not going to be there to be able to defend them. So you need to be able to have that person already have preempted that they're going to get asked that, because in their mind, as soon as they go out and they take it to somebody else, family and friends are often the ones that are dream stealers and will knock you on the head and say, well, why are you even going to a seminar? They're just a waste of time going to seminars. Who's had that? Who's had family, friends say, well, why are you doing this? All right. But if you've already had that being preempted and you've thought about it, and this is what we're talking about, then you can already have the answers to that in your mind. So you've got the answer when someone says, well, why are you doing this? You've got the answer. All right, does that make sense?
I want to make just a couple of additional points. Number one, anytime somebody enters into a transaction for the first time, there's a degree of risk, a degree of uncertainty, a degree of hesitation. And if you're going to someone and you're proposing something for the very first time, okay, it could be a brand new idea. Okay, it could be something that's never been tried before in their industry, and you're going to say, you know what, I got this idea for a joint venture. We'll come together, I'll do this, and you'll do this, and we'll make $1 billion. And they'll say, well, how do you know it's going to work? There's no way to validate it, right? It's never been done before. What you can do is look for validation in other industries, look for validation in other markets, look for validation with other people, look for validation in other types of transactions that you can use as a way not only to think through the opportunity, but also that you can convey the opportunity in such a way that they can understand it's something they can relate to.